And it's 4 o'clock. Thanks everyone for your promptness, season's greetings, and I think that this is the last CD committee meeting of the year. So thanks for a great year. We got a lot done. Hey, Chai, nice to see you. Uh, so uh, good afternoon. I am Robert Lilligan, the chair of the Metropolitan Council Community Development Committee, and it's Monday, December 20th, 2021. It's a regularly scheduled meeting. And just before calling the meeting to order, a few things about how we conduct this meeting. COVID-19 is still causing us to alter our usual procedures, and so our chair, Metropolitan Council Chair, has determined it's not practical or prudent to conduct in-person committee meetings in response to the pandemic. So we will participate in this meeting by electronic means, and this Community Development Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota statutes. The meeting will be conducted on WebEx. It'll be recorded. Members of the public will be able to monitor this meeting by going to the agenda online and view the live stream of the meeting. The video is embedded there. I guess this is a special meeting of the Community Development Committee to take public comment from residents that pre-registered to speak on the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals for 17 cities in the region to re-enroll in the Livable Communities Act. More on that in a minute for the local housing incentives account program. During this meeting, I asked that council members speak up to let me know they'd like to speak if I miss you raising your hand. And because this is a virtual meeting, Michelle will call the roll for each item. So if there are no questions on that, I'll call this meeting to order and ask Michelle to please take a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. Michelle.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. I'll start with Chambliss.
I am here.
Cummings.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Musset. Bento.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a quorum. The first item is our approval of our agenda. The agenda is posted at the website. Members can see it there. And if there are now no objections or changes, then we can move on to our business. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the next item are the minutes from the November 15th committee meeting. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Mr. Chair,
Excuse
just
me.
to,
Yep.
sorry,
Sorry. Go ahead, Lisa. I think we're going to say the same thing.
Yep, that would be
What
the
did I
December.
skip?
Nothing, you skipped nothing.
Okay.
I just gave you the wrong information. That should be the December 6th committee meeting.
Thank you. See, I'll read anything you put in front of me. Danger. I'm sorry, what was the correct date, Lisa?
December 6th.
Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to approve the December 6th CDC committee meeting or minutes.
Johnson moves approval.
Thanks. That's a first from Johnson, a second from Vento. Any discussion, additions, or corrections? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Musset. Bento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That carries. The next item of business is our public hearing for the 2021 through 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals for communities re-enrolling in the Livable Communities Act local housing incentive account program. And committee members, of course, at my council, we like to encourage as much community comment and participation as possible. And some of those hearings are required statutorily. And so we'll move into the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals and Livable Communities Act re-enrollment public hearing. And I'll turn this over to Community Development Director Barajas. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren, and thank you to everyone for joining us today to consider comments related to the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals adopted by communities choosing to re-enroll in the Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentives Account. Livable Communities Act is a voluntary program that allows participating communities to apply for grants that support brownfield cleanup, the creation and preservation of affordable housing, the creation and preservation of living wage jobs, compact connected development, and transit-oriented development. The Community Development Committee held hearings in December of 2020 and January of 2021 for a bulk re-enrollment of 59 communities. Since then, 17 additional communities have adopted affordable and life cycle housing goals and wish to participate in the Livable Communities Act programs for the remainder of the 2021 to 2030 decade. Today's hearing is only for the affordable and life cycle housing goals for the 17 new communities as detailed in the business item that was posted with our agenda today. Each of these communities have appropriately adopted their goals locally by the required statutory deadline. So I'll turn it back to Chair Lilligren to conduct the hearing.
Thank you, Director Barajas. In a moment, I will open the public hearing and then I'll end it when all the commenters have been heard, and we'll continue with the rest of our business. Any commenters, you're welcome to remain on the event and listen to the rest of the meeting. When you do speak, please state your name, place of residence, and the organization, if any, that you represent. And I'll remind us how you can submit written statements at the close of the end of the public hearing. And so I guess I would turn to either Ms. Beard or Ms. Weiner to see if there are any pre-registered commenters. Michelle or Tara, anyone?
I do
I'm
not
not
know
aware
any.
of any.
Great, thank you both. And then I guess I would ask, is there anyone that's joined us to address us on this item? Who wasn't pre-registered, you're welcome to address us. Okay. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and just announce that public comments will be accepted through 4 p.m. on January 3rd, 2022. To comment on the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals for communities re-enrolling in the Livable Communities Act Local Housing Incentive Account Program for that time period, you can write to the council at 390 Robert Street North, St. Paul, Minnesota at 55101. You can email the council at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, or you can call and record a public comment at 651-602-1500. Thank you for attending the public hearing. I guess no one did. So we'll now return to our agenda. The next item on our agenda is the funding recommendations for the 2021 Tax-Based Revitalization Account, or TBRA, Round 2. And Marcus Martin is here to present. Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am indeed here to present the recommendations for the tax-based revitalization account grants. Thank you for putting it on your agenda. Sometimes when I present, I don't always see the comments. So if you'd like to ask a question, I ask that you just interrupt me if that's the case.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Right. Next slide, please. So we'll start with some background. The statutory purpose of the TBRA account is to help clean up contamination for redevelopment projects that will improve the tax base and add jobs or affordable housing to communities participating in the LCA program. The account is also expected to provide the highest benefits for costs incurred and consider funding from our joint funding partners. Next slide, please. Our second call for applications in 2021 started in late August and kind of continued kind of into early September. As you can see in the map, we received 14 applications for projects located in Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, St. Paul, and South St. Paul. We received 3 types of applications, 2 seed grants, 1 investigation grant request, and 11 cleanup grant requests. Slide, please. We offered 3.2 million and received requests for 3.6 million in this funding cycle. However, not all of the requests were eligible for funding, and this is an important condition for imposing the funding limits. Notably, we also received a lower amount of grant funding requested from suburban locations. That was 17% than our target of at least 25% of the funding available. Next slide, please. So I'll start with the seed recommendations. 2 seed grants recommended for funding are 1108 East Lake, 24,100, and 405 East Lake, 27,500. And I'll note that the change there, the recommended funding takes into account a required matching cost. Next slide, please. An investigation grant is recommended for Washburn Flats in the amount of 43,800. Slide. And the following 8 cleanup grants are recommended for funding. Farwell Yards, 400,700. 176 South Robert, 551,400. Union Park Flats, 236,800. Northrop King Residential, 457,200. Hotel Indigo North Star, 865,800. St. Olaf Exodus Apartments, 233,700. Kyle Garden, 203,100. And Kimball Court, 147,700. Slide, please. When there is a higher demand for funds than the amount of funds available by statute, up to 50% can be awarded to a single community, and up to 75% of the funding can go to Minneapolis and St. Paul. However, in this funding cycle, because the eligible requests were equal to the funding available, there was not a higher demand for funding. Thus, the funding limits shown here on the pie charts were not applied. Slide, please. Oh, let's go into the unfunded a little bit more. 3 projects are not recommended or not eligible for funding, and I'll start with the projects on the left side of the screen. In the case of Beltline Station, a review of the total environmental sampling and cleanup costs indicated that the project didn't demonstrate sufficient need for cleanup funding relative to the total development cost. And there is still some funding pending from our funding partners, funding request that is. And looking at the projects on the right, 2 of the projects not recommended for funding here did not meet a required minimum score.
Mr.
So
Chair,
according to, yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
I was just gonna say I can't see the
Thanks, Councilman
PowerPoint,
Lindstrom.
and then it just magically appeared right when I
Right.
right when I interrupted you.
Yeah, thanks, Councilman Lindstrom and Mr. Martin. It wasn't, the slides weren't advancing for us, and I usually
Oh, I
follow on.
apologize. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's all right. And then all of a sudden they did. So I think we are in the right spot now. Thanks.
All right, let me see here. Are we looking at the unfunded applications? Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Councilman
so-
Johnson.
sorry to bother you. Could we just go back 1 slide? Because I think we missed that too. I just want to get it in
Right.
mind as we move
Okay.
forward.
Thanks. If we could, please, Greg or Mr. Martin, to go back 1 slide. And I was toggling between the slides online and the slides on WebEx here, and so I was kind of not sure where we were. Yeah, so if we could go back 1 slide to the pie charts.
The
that's, I
funding
think, what
limits
we-
there? Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
the funding limits.
I think Greg is having a little technical difficulties.
Okay.
We're seeing on our screen that he's wanting to share his content. So Should only be a second, hopefully.
I can see I can.
We do see the slide, but Greg, there was a lag in advancing them, so we did not have the slide with the statutory funding limits of the pie charts up when Mr. Martin was talking about them. So if we could
Oh.
go back one slide to slide number 8.
Interesting. I'm seeing an error message. So
Yeah, I've seen error
Oh,
messages
okay.
that
We're
you're-
still seeing
Get
the
it done.
unfunded applications, which is slide number 9. Yeah, we're out of
Maybe I was
sync.
here.
Oh, yeah, that's not what we're seeing. Yep, something's going on. Yep, I was doing both and kind of toggling between, and so that's why I was trying to figure out if the slides weren't advancing or not. Now I am watching in the meeting, and I'm seeing slide 9, unfunded applications.
Okay, and Councilmember Lee and I are seeing just Greg Ritchie is sharing. It's starting to share content. We have a white
Okay.
screen with this little black dialog box.
Same here.
Okay,
Thanks.
the last meeting of the year is going to go out with a bang.
Right. Well, uh, I'm just seeing the message that you're starting to share.
Same here.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm still not seeing.
No, not seeing the right slide. Now I'm seeing just the white screen that says viewing
Yep.
Greg's screen, but
Me too.
Yeah,
I'm
I
seeing
have
that same
Greg
screen.
starting to share content. We
I
do
have the
have
same.
access through the agenda if anybody
Sure.
is able to pull it up on another screen to see the slides. But yeah, it's been goofy.
I cannot attempt to do that. Yeah. If it shows up the same way when I'm presenting for you. I'll have to go to the static one.
Yes, I can see Marcus.
I am looking at the presentation through the website right now. Oh, good.
And that's what I was doing. Councilmember Chamis was doing through that. So it looks like Tara has been able to share her screen.
Looks great.
Yep.
And then if you go to slide 8, please, Tara. Oh, they're not moving. So if you're moving them, I'm not seeing it. Oh,
There
there
we
they
go.
go.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, there. Perfect. Thank you. Is this
All
going to
right. So I
work?
understand there's a question here. Yeah.
We just didn't have the graphic in front of us when we were talking about it, Marcus. And so maybe if we could just start again here.
Sure. Sure. All right. So in this case, when there is and in each round, when there is a higher demand for the funds than the amount of funds available, by statute, up to 50% of the funding can go to a single community, and up to 75% can go to Minneapolis and St. Paul. However, in this funding cycle, because the eligible requests were equal to the funding available, there wasn't a higher demand for funding, and thus these funding limits that you see in these pie charts were not applied. Let's go to the next slide. All right, we can recap the unfunded here. There are 3 projects that are either not recommended or not eligible for funding. So I'll start with the one on the left of your screen, the Beltline Station. In the case of Beltline Station, the total environmental sampling and cleanup costs indicated for the project did not demonstrate sufficient need for cleanup funding relative to the total development costs. There's a ratio we used there. We do have some additional funding pending for this project from our funding partners. Then looking at those two projects on the right, the two projects not recommended for funding in this case did not meet the required minimum score. According to our grant criteria in the fund distribution plan, at least 75 points or higher out of 150 are needed to be recommended for funding by staff. So while the two warehouse projects did show a need for soil vapor mitigation, neither had plans for redevelopment. Thus, they didn't offer sufficient regional benefits, such as increase to the tax capacity or job growth when compared with competing applications. Please.
So I do have a question on that one.
All right, very good.
So the two that did not meet the minimum score because they didn't have the development plans, I'm taking that's, if I'm understanding that correctly, why would they be applying for the cleanup funds if they did not plan to develop? Or how does that get proposed?
Well, they did have an eligible need in the sense that they both of these sites were intending to add a vapor mitigation system. So they did have that, and they did have some aspects. They're retaining workers that are already there, but because they're not doing anything in addition to that, it just didn't meet enough of the criteria, right? So they aren't doing other things such as adding to the tax base.
So did they get a report indicating that there was a vapor issue, and then they applied, or how did that happen? How did they get incentivized to apply?
Participation is voluntary, right? So they went out and as part of, they enrolled in the voluntary investigation cleanup program at the Pollution Control Agency, and they did some studies. And the result of those studies indicated that there indeed was a need for soil vapor mitigation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part of your statement.
Well, I'm saying that they enrolled in the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. They have a voluntary investigation and cleanup program. And when they enrolled in that, then they did some studies, right? The building owners, they did some studies of the sites. And that's when it was found that they needed to install a vapor mitigation.
Okay, was that the city of Minneapolis?
The property owners enroll in the program.
Oh, the property owners. Okay. All right.
Correct. Other questions about the unfunded? All right, next slide, please. Shown here are the cumulative expected benefits to the region if the staff recommendation is approved. After redevelopment, gains are expected in the annual tax base, jobs, housing units, including affordable units, as well as adding commercial and industrial space. Slide, please. In closing, the staff recommendation to this committee, as listed in the business item, is that the Metropolitan Council award 11 tax-based revitalization account grants shown in Table 1 of the business item, and authorize its Community Development Division Director to execute grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for the presentation and for your work on this. Committee members, any questions on that report? Any questions?
I have a question, Chair. It's Molly.
Yeah, thanks. Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you remind us what a site investigation grant is? We don't see that as often as the others. What are the parameters for that grant?
Yes. So the site investigation is intended to follow up and find out if there indeed is a contaminant on a property, what type, and how severe and where that's located. So we often see that, early on when people are kind of contemplating buying property, or they just bought property and they suspect that it's contaminated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cummings. Further questions on the report? Any questions? Hearing none, committee members, Mr. Merton has recommended that we award 11 tax-based revitalization account grants as shown in Table 1 of the report, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the Metropolitan Council. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved by Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember. Second?
Coming seconds?
Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion? Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we will move on to our next business item, which is 2021-356. It's a project change for Stonehouse Square Contamination Cleanup Grant. It's the second project change, and Sam Johnson is here to present. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you much, Chair Lilligren and members of the CDC. So my name is Sam Johnson, and once again, I am a senior grant administrator with the LCA program. The action that I'm going to be putting before you is to approve a second project change as detailed in the business item and this presentation for the Stonehouse Square grant, which was
Mr. Johnson, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Greg, we're not seeing the slides again. I don't know what others are seeing, but I just see Greg is starting to share content. And so it looks like Councilmember Lee is seeing the same. Interesting. Tara's stepping up again. Thanks, Tara.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for trying. Yeah. All right, I think we're back on track, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Okay, so just stop me if we have any other technical difficulties. I'm fine with that, and we'll work through them. But this business item is for the CDC to consider a project change for the Stonehouse Square Contamination Cleanup Grant, which was awarded to the City of Minneapolis in 2019. So just a little background on the Stonehouse Square Cleanup Grant. The property was originally constructed as a convent in the late 1800s. This particular site was developed with a streetcar coal and oil house, and then was converted to housing in the 1970s, which consequently was also the last time that the structures had substantial rehab. So when the City of Minneapolis applied for this project on behalf of Common Bond, Stonehouse Square is described as a naturally occurring affordable housing. It also has Section 8 HAP, HAP contract for 19 units, and that was set to expire in December of 2019. So this compound was put up for sale, and Common Bond stepped in as a nonprofit purchaser with the goal of rehabbing the property while preserving the affordability of these units. Back in 2019, the council awarded the City of Minneapolis $140,700 in tax-based revitalization. This is a contamination cleanup grant. And the specific activities of the grant were to fund abatement plan for the project, soil remediation, and then also related environmental oversight. Next slide, please. So lucky for me, we just got to participate in funding consideration for this upcoming. So Marcus said it better than I could, but whenever the CDC is recommending funding for projects, one condition that we have is if there are changes to the project, just to stay fair, we we require that the grantees report those changes to us. And then if we consider them significant changes, we rescore it and put it before the CDC once again, just to have another approval of the project. Next slide, please. So the city of Minneapolis approached us a couple of weeks ago after Comm Bonds had finalized their financing for this project and notified us that there was an adjustment to the affordability of the units.
WebEx Assistant is enabled to save audio highlights.
This is the bottom row, if you see. 18 units from that 61 to 80% to the 51 to 60%. So they were making a significant amount of the units in the project more affordable. So while this was an increase in affordable units, it does, and any increase in affordable units doesn't require CDC approval. What does require CDC approval is the fact that that switch made the net tax capacity of the project decrease significantly. And as you can see in the middle row there, net tax capacity decreased from an estimated $19,425 to $1,994. When rescored, the project scored lower, though it would still have been recommended for funding. So Minneapolis came before us. They explained that Comm Bonds was trying to balance requirements of receiving tax credits on those affordable housing units with the desire to avoid displacing existing residents in the complex who exceed the income limits. And CDC approved that first change to the project. Unfortunately, Comm Bond was unable to secure a tax credit investor for the project. And so over the course of the summertime and their continued efforts to fund the project and maintain the deeply affordable units in the project, they removed the income restriction on the final 11 units in that top band of affordability, that 61 to 80%. So these do not increase the net tax capacity for the project, so that remains the same. And those deeply affordable units, the ones between 35 and 50% and between 51 and 60% are unchanged. Next slide, please. So in our due diligence, we reviewed it. Any decrease in affordable units is considered a significant change that needs to go before CDC. So in our review, we just want to note that there is no change to the net tax capacity. There is a decrease from 71 to 60 units that are rent restricted affordable units. And so as a result, the project would have scored lower, 83 points as compared to 88 points. And to put that into context, the project would have been ranked 8th in the pool of applicants against the pool of applicants in 2019 instead of the 6th that it was at first scored at. When looking back at the requirements that were present when this project was funded back in 2016, we did find that it still would have been recommended for funding both as a standalone project and in comparison to the other projects that were present during that funding cycle. And so Therefore, staff are coming before you with a recommendation that you consider continuing to fund this project at the same level as it had been approved back in 2019. Next slide, please. So the proposed action, I asked the Community Development Committee to approve this second project changed as detailed in this report and further detailed in the business item for the Stonehouse Square grant awarded to the City of Minneapolis. And with that, I welcome questions and I will answer as best I'm able. We also have staff from the City of Minneapolis and Common Bond who are present who can answer more detailed questions if I'm unable to do so. Are fine with stepping up to.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Johnson, for the report, and thanks to our partners for being here and being willing to answer questions. Questions on this report? I'll start with Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. I do have a question, and that is related to the developer being unable to secure a tax credit investor for the average income project. Where there circumstances that have changed since the original project start, where there's limited opportunity to find tax credit investors, or did the financial situation change where it just didn't make sense in the market that we have for investors?
Thanks, Councilmember. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren and Councilmember Chambliss. My understanding is that Common Bonds jumped in to secure this project before they had secured financing moving forward. They were really trying to get ahead of other developers who likely were going to change this to market rate apartments. And so what I've been hearing from the City of Minneapolis is that they have been working to put together their funding stack, and this award was part of that funding stack. And so it's kind of something where they're coming in on the back end, and that's the level that I feel confident I've been hearing from them. But if that's not sufficient for you, I would welcome representative from Common Bond to correct me or.
And Mr. Geisler, I do see that, or Mr. Johnson, I do see that Ms. Geisler from the City of Minneapolis went on camera. So I'm assuming you might have something to add, Amy?
Thank you, Chair Lilligren and Councilmember Chambliss. Yes, I'll agree with what Sam had to say. This project, they were originally, Councilmember Chambliss, to your question, looking at doing income averaging. It's been very challenging for tax credit projects to secure investors for income average projects in the tax credit market. So they had to switch to a non-income average structure, which really necessitated the change in the project description. They do have a tax credit investor on board now. I just wanted to clarify that. And this project is on track to close on its financing next week and start construction soon thereafter. So this is really kind of the last detail to fall into place before they're ready to close and start construction.
Thank you, Ms. Geisler. And then if the representative from Common Bond has anything to add, is that, I'm not sure who that is. Is that you, Mr. Hughes, or anyone? Anything?
This is Andy from Mahoney Development. I'm the development consultant for the project, but Heidi Rathman from Common Bond is available as well if she'd like to opine on that.
Well, maybe I'll turn to Ms. Rathman. Anything to add? Ms. Rathman.
And
anything?
Heidi may have technical difficulties responding. So I'll just echo what Sam and Amy both said, that the project is ready to close next week, and the change was necessitated by the tax credit market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Great.
Thank you, if I may.
Chambliss? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad that you're able to close on this project and move forward. In terms of the fact that you have tax credit investors now, and you already have a need to retain the residents, what happens if there's turnover after you have an opportunity for tax credit? Is it too late after closing to get credit, or how does that work?
Mr. Johnson.
I would defer to the representative from Common Bond or the city of Minneapolis. I'm not aware of those details myself, but if you like, we also could follow up if they don't have an answer for you now.
So, Ms. Geisler, anything?
Chair Lilligren, council members, Andy, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Yes, will do. Chair and council or committee members. Unfortunately, it'll be too late later on in the process to make these units affordable, and that's because other lenders in the project, which include Minnesota Housing, HUD, and many other parties, set the rent schedule up front, and so it's really important for all of the other layers of underwriting and financing that it's set at closing and doesn't change thereafter. So at this point, that change would be locked into the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Councilmember Chambliss.
No, that's it. Thank you. That definitely answered my question.
Thank you. Further questions, Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting this because it's important that you get to closing and we don't want to hold it up. My question is, it was because of the loss of tax credits when the change was made to drop the 11 units of 80% AMI. Was that the cause for having to drop those to get those up to the market rate to make the whole project work? Do I understand that correctly?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Johnson, it is my understanding that the 11 were dropped as they were putting together their funding over the summertime. It wasn't necessarily a direct consequence to them failing to get the funding the last time around, but as they were moving towards this closing date at the end of the year here, just the new structure was that they had the 60 at the two affordability bands and removed the 11 at that top band.
Mr. Chair, if I could follow up. And to just clarify, who was requiring that they do the 60 at the two bands of 30 and 60?
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Johnson, I would defer once again to the city or to Andy Hughes on that one. It's not a requirement of ours, but it's something that we take under consideration when scoring the project. And so ask that our applicants articulate the level of affordability for the project as a part of our consideration for funding.
And
Mr. Hughes and Ms. Geisler, do you have a further response?
Yes, maybe I'll just add in, Chair Lilligren, council members. So the second project description that Sam showed on his slide, that was the project kind of description that we anticipated at that time, based on an income average tax credit structure. As the project financing has evolved over time, and they had to move away from that income averaging, that's why they dropped that last band. I do want to note, though, that the rents that they're actually using in the building are still technically in that 60 to 80% AMI band. It's just that there are some existing tenants in those 11 units that are above those income limits. And that is kind of an additional complication of the tax credit structure. I will also say from the city's perspective, so the city has also put quite a bit of funding into this project. We're putting in, we have an affordable housing trust fund loan. We have some other sources of funds, and we are also restricting the 30 to 50% AMI units and then the 50 to 60% AMI units. But those units that are in that 61 to 80% band, that's not an affordability band that the city itself would typically restrict. And it's kind of an artifact of the project description that was presented to the Met Council with that TBRA application. It was kind of locked in at that time. But then as we've been talking about, the financing has shifted over time. Those 11 units have needed to kind of drop those income restrictions to make the tax credits work.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
I appreciate it. It's just, hopefully, it's great to save this. I get it. We don't want it to be lost. And have it be unaffordable to a lot of people. So I get it. I'll just have to study more about tax credits and financing and all that. But I appreciate the amount of lift that must have gone into this to get it to where it's at. So thank you for all of that, and I'll be supporting it tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions, committee members? And I can't see all of you at one time, so please just speak up. Further questions? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Ms. Geisler. Thanks, Mr. Johnson, for sure. And also thanks, Mr. Hughes, for being here to answer our questions. And you're right, Councilmember Johnson. I mean, this is so complicated. There's so many dynamics at play here. And I think the really interesting aspect of not wanting to render people homeless by imposing income restrictions on the units they're already living in is a very valid decision. I'll just remind us, this committee made this decision just last April with the second project change, or the first project change, and that was the heavy lift, right? That's where you saw the projected tax revenues really decrease. And so this is I think, a good effort to keep this project moving forward, and a really good example of how complicated and difficult it is to keep affordable housing projects moving forward in a public sector funding environment. So good work to all involved. I'm sure it was a heavy lift to get here. And so committee members, the proposed action is that the Community Development Committee approve the second project change as detailed in their support for the Stonehouse Square Grant SG 12848 awarded to the City of Minneapolis. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Is there a second?
Bento seconds.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'll just remind folks that the Community Development Committee has the final part. This won't be coming before the full council. So unless I'm mistaken, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think that's correct. So we will be making this decision tonight. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Yes, Chair Lilligren. Chambliss?
Aye.
Cummings?
Aye.
Johnson? Lee?
Aye.
Aye.
Lilligren?
Aye.
Lindstrom?
Aye.
Bento?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. That item is adopted, and we have finished with the business items on our agenda. We'll move into our three information items now. The first is the report of the Land Use Advisory Committee, and I am appreciative to Councilmember Wendy Wolf for her service and her report, and also Deb Dietrich is here to present. Wendy and Deb, welcome.
I'm seeing it.
Yep.
You can go to the next slide. Deb, are you presenting or am I presenting?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf, I believe you are.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to step on your toes if you had something ready.
Well, and my apologies if I created confusion. I saw both names on the agenda and I didn't want to exclude anyone.
No problem. Thank you. As you know, Land Use Advisory Committee has members from all of the council districts, including two in Deb Barber's district because she spans two counties and every county has to have representation as well. Next slide, please. So we had a presentation on the comprehensive plan updates, looking at how to improve the process for next time. And there was a lot of discussion. Our staff, council staff, is doing a good job of trying to tease out all of the things that might not have gone as smoothly as we would like, so that the next process can be better. And our committee members had a lot of discussion about that, and it was well taken by staff. We got an update on the Planet program, and not a lot of questions or comments afterwards. And then a presentation on source water protection and connections to land use, which is part of the ongoing partnership between the Land Use Advisory Committee and the Metropolitan Area Water Supply Advisory Committee on cooperation on water planning and land use. Next slide, please. So just like the council saw at the committee of the whole on August 4th, we had a presentation on the land use inventory, and there was a lot of discussion. The presentation was pretty much the same as what we saw. The one difference that really came out in that presentation, though, is the amount of land that is being converted from agricultural or undeveloped uses to solar farms. It's about 2/3 of all of the industrial development that occurred, which is a lot, and something that we probably need to consider more for the future, because yes, we do have solar farms or solar arrays going up on top of buildings, but while we're doing a good job of protecting agricultural land from development, we're not doing a very good job of protecting it from being shifted to solar farms. And so the committee had some discussion about ways to make the solar arrays more land efficient and not take up good agricultural land in the process. Next slide, please. We had a presentation on the LHIA affordable home ownership pilot. Of course, community development has been seeing the same sort of information. There was discussion, but not a whole lot of advice to the council on what to do. It was more finding out which communities might be eligible for funds and whatnot. There was a comment from one member, however, that sort of stuck out to me, that it was presented as sort of a done deal and not asking for input on the actual program, but just on kind of the details of the scoring. And so if there is opportunity to pick people's brains a little earlier rather than later, that's always a good thing. And then, of course, information about transit-oriented development. And we talked briefly about the work plan for next year, which is largely going to be driven by preparation for our next round of comprehensive plans and figuring out the community designations for the next round. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Questions on that report, committee members? Any questions? Hearing none, again, my thanks to Councilmember Wolf, to Ms. Dietrich as well, and to the entire Land Use Advisory group. And I just find those updates so interesting, so thank you. And we will move, yep, thank you. We'll move on to our second information item. It's the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Report. Another really interesting report. I look forward to more analysis. I think this tells us a lot about what's going on in the metropolitan area as far as what communities envision their futures to be. And so I would turn this over to Mr. Larson to present, please.
Chair Lilligren, if I could.
Oh, Ms. Torres, yes, please introduce this item.
Hi, this is Angela Torres. I'm the manager of local planning assistance. Mike and Caitlin will be presenting today in just a moment. I just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce Caitlin Shampoo before her first presentation to the committee. Caitlin joined the local planning assistance team about 2.5 years ago, and in April she was promoted to associate planner. During her time at the council, Caitlin has completed research on local comprehensive plans, developed technical resources for local governments, and assisted with environmental reviews and comprehensive plan amendments. She's currently on project teams working on climate change and solar energy. She's on the debrief that Councilmember Wolf mentioned that you'll see before you in January, a debrief of the comprehensive planning process. And she's supporting work for planning for the next regional development guide. So I think what you'll see shortly is that we are very lucky to have Caitlin on the team. Caitlin, I'll
Great.
turn it over to you for the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Torres, for that introduction, and welcome to the committee, Ms. Shampoo. And I wasn't quite certain how to pronounce your name. That's why I didn't say it. That's what I figured it was. I bet that happens a lot. So, Ms. Shampoo, and Mr. Larson, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Angela, for the introduction. And I believe Angela will be sharing her screen with our presentation shortly. But good afternoon, Chair and committee members. As Angela mentioned, I'm Caitlin Shampoo, an associate planner in the local planning assistance unit. And today, my colleague Mike Larson and I will share findings from our inventory and analysis of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan amendments. Next slide, please. Over the past, next slide, Angela. Perfect, thank you. Over the past several months, we have been compiling information related to comp plan amendments to better understand them and report on any themes we identify. This work built off the comprehensive plan composite analysis, which was first presented to the Committee of the Whole on April 7th, 2021. And through this ongoing inventory and analysis of amendments, we intend to help staff provide assistance to local governments, as well as help craft future regional policies and practices. In particular, this information could inform discussion of future community designations as part of the 2050 Regional Development Guide. So today we will provide an overview of how and why local governments are amending their plans and the overall impact of amendments. We will share additional details on amendments associated with changes in guiding land use and development proposals, along with information on the general location of amendments and several brief examples of both typical and atypical amendments. Moving forward, we intend to report on this information on a regular basis, likely annually, and are interested in hearing your reactions, questions, and other input to inform future reporting and analysis. Next slide, please. So to set the stage for this information, we wanted to share 4 general findings identified in our analysis. First, there are many and multiple reasons for local governments to amend their comprehensive plan. Most amendments involve changes in guiding land use in response to development proposals that are supported by the city, but may not be consistent with the current guiding land use in their adopted plan. There are also other reasons for amendments, including the incorporation of more detailed planning, such as neighborhood or station area plans, refinement of policy, or changes in the timing, location, or staging of development. Our data shows that of the amendments that propose changes in guiding land use, most increased the allowable density of the affected area. And finally, we found that emerging suburban edge communities have submitted the greatest share of amendments compared to other community designations. Next slide, please. And as previously mentioned, there are various reasons for amending comp plans, and they often fall into 2 buckets, development-driven and planning-related. So development-driven amendments typically involve changes in guiding land use to accommodate a specific project. However, they may also be accompanied by a MUSA expansion or staging change, an annexation by ordinance, or a forecast change. Planning-related amendments, on the other hand, often involve policy or text revisions that stem from a neighborhood plan or other planning study. For example, an amendment may propose the creation of a new guiding land use or a change in the allowable density range of an existing land use. A large percentage of amendments in our inventory are associated with a development, but we hypothesize that the council may see fewer development-driven amendments if there's less market activity in the future. Additionally, we might see more planning-related amendments as time passes from comprehensive plan adoption and local governments conduct further planning efforts. Next slide, please. The data we are reporting on today consists of 169 actions approved through October 13th, 2021. And it's important to point out that this number does not represent the number of reviews the council has done, but rather the number of discrete actions represented in the submittals. We want to make this distinction because when communities submit amendments for our review, they might include multiple policy changes or actions. For example, a city might propose to change the density range of a guiding land use and to re-guide a property within the same submittal. So for our purposes, we disaggregated this information and reported them as separate actions. And as you can see in this graph, the individual bars add up to more than 169, which is why it's also important to note that the types of actions are not mutually exclusive. For example, an amendment that creates a new guiding land use is also considered a text amendment. Additionally, a guiding change or MUSA-related amendment may also be associated with a community designation change. All of that said, there are several takeaways we want to highlight from this graph. So first, most changes in guiding land use are associated with a development proposal, and those that are not may have served to correct a land use guiding to align with the existing use or to prepare an area for anticipated development in the future. Second, there were 13 amendments associated with a MUSA change, and 8 of these changes occurred in emerging suburban edge communities. And finally, several amendments created a new guiding land use or changed the density range of a land use category, but in general, these are fairly uncommon. Next slide, please. And as committee members are aware, comp plan amendments may require consideration by the full council or be reviewed administratively by staff if they meet the criteria outlined in the council's administrative review guidelines. Of the 13 criteria, this slide highlights those of most concern when determining a review type, which includes the change in residential capacity, acreage, and consistency with regional policy. Of the 169 actions, 121 were reviewed administratively by staff and 48 were reviewed by the council, meaning that committee members have seen approximately 1/4 of the amendments. So we're hoping that today this presentation will give you a fuller picture of all of the amendments submitted to the council. Next slide, please. And on this slide, we'll take a closer look at the amendments that requested a change in guiding land use. So this graphic shows the breakdown by type of change, specifically looking
I'm
at.
sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Shampoo, but I see that Councilmember Lee has a question.
Yes, please.
Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Kayla, on slide 4, under development driven with the forecast change, I was curious, what is the who or what is the originator of forecast change? Would that be us in terms of how we see demographics change, or would that be something the city brings up?
Thank you, Chair and committee member. Mike, would you like to take that?
I'm happy to. Happy to, Caitlin. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Typically, the need for a forecast change is identified by forecast staff in the community development division and then discussed with staff at time of application. A smaller number of amendments that are anticipated and are discussed with, say, the sector representatives and local planning assistants may involve a discussion about the need for forecast change. And so we do that analysis of the need so that can accompany the action by the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shampoo.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. To pick off where I left off, so this graphic shows the breakdown by type of change. We're specifically looking at shifts between residential and non-residential land uses. And I also want to note that for our purposes today, the term residential captures both residential only categories and mixed use categories that allow residential development. That said, approximately 50% of these amendments proposed a change in guiding land use from one residential category to another. Additionally, nearly 3/4 of amendments that impacted residential density, or in other words, All of the amendments, except for the non-residential to non-residential changes, resulted in an overall increase in housing capacity. Next slide, please. This slide provides high-level data points related to development-driven amendments. In total, these amendments impact 1,356 acres, accounting for a little over 7,000 residential units, which includes 350 affordable housing units and approximately 1 million square feet of commercial industrial space. Next slide, please. Among the 181 communities and 7 counties in the region that require comp plans, only 49, or about 1/4, have amended their plans. These communities are highlighted in green on the map, and as you can see, there's a fairly even distribution throughout the urban service area in the region. And of those 49 communities that have submitted amendments, 12 account for approximately 50% of the amendments when specifically looking at the number of actions associated with each community's submittals. Next slide, please. And finally, this slide shows the distribution of amendments by community designation. As you can see, most amendments were submitted by communities in the urban service area, and as previously mentioned, emerging suburban edge communities submitted the most amendments compared to other community designations, including a vast majority of MUSA-related changes and the greatest share of actions reviewed by the council. And with that, I will hand off the presentation to Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. So this chart shows residential density changes by community designation, and as with the previous slide, showing the most urban community designation on the left and the least urban on the right. The green bar shows the number of amendments that involve the density increase, with the blue bar showing the number of decreases. As you can see, there were many more increases in density than decreases, and this is not expected. This is what we had seen prior to the submittal of 2040 Comprehensive Plan updates. It reflects a market that in most cases is responding to increased density. There are many ways to slice and dice this information, and we are evaluating the overall impacts of these changes. In other words, we're looking at how significant the change in density is, how much acreage is affected. In terms of capacity for development, what we're seeing initially is that suburban communities are where this impact is most pronounced, where there's a more significant increase in densities across a broader acreage, and having the overall biggest impact on development capacity, and that's an analysis that we're continuing to do. On the other hand, you can see that there were the greatest number of both increases as well as decreases in density among the emerging suburban edge communities. And considering that these communities are on the growing edge of the region, this is also not surprising, and there's a lot of change in both directions. And although these changes are more modest in their overall impact than what we're seeing in the suburban communities. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you just 2 examples of amendments associated with development. One that was reviewed administratively on the left, and one was that was reviewed by the council. You may or may not remember this. The first is the Lakeville Cordelia Development Amendment, which changed the guiding land use of 22.4 acres from medium density to medium high density residential. It accommodated a development of 171 attached townhomes. The change in density was relatively modest in this particular case. The change in density range from what was 4 to 7 increased to 5 to 9 units per acre. So although the project was 171 units, it met our administrative review guidelines for a change of capacity of less than 100 units. Our forecast staff at that time deemed that a forecast change was not necessary due to the relatively modest nature of the amendment in terms of capacity. And just finally, note that Lakeville is a suburban edge community. The second amendment on the right was the Corcoran-Tavera development, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which changed the guiding land use of 96 acres from ag preserve to low density residential. And it revised the development staging of the site to accommodate anticipated development of 549 units of a low density mix of single family attached townhomes and the like. Due to the scale of this development, this was also associated with an environmental review, an environmental assessment worksheet. And although forecast staff recommended a slight change in where forecasts were expected to occur, that they deemed that a citywide forecast was not necessary. And finally, Corcoran is an emerging suburban edge community. It's one of those communities with the greatest numbers of shifts. Next slide, please. You may or may not remember this review from St. Louis Park that came to the council. It involved two components that were kind of providing a simple overview for here. The first one involved a text change and related to its policy for the guiding land use of mixed use. This change applied anywhere in the city with this guiding land use. So kind of could refer to this as a global policy change for that guiding land use. An excerpt of that change in the policy is shown on the left, which introduced the possibility of light industrial uses in as a non-residential component in mixed-use districts. The other change associated with the amendment was to re-guide most of the property in the historic Walker Lake district to mixed use from a mix of commercial and industrial and medium-density residential. This is an area of the city where there are small-scale light industrial uses, and they're expected to coexist with other uses, including commercial and residential. So this St. Louis Park is an urban center community, and this is a prime example of how cities continue to address evolving planning needs in their communities. Next slide, please. 7 amendments over the nearly 3 years were associated with annexations. In 2021, the city of Waconia submitted amendments to re-guide this 43.4 acres that you see on the aerial photo, recently annexed from Waconia Township. It was the amendment assigned a guiding land use of low density residential. And given that the city did not have an orderly annexation agreement with the township, the city needed to assign this new guiding land use. This was administratively reviewed by the council staff because it did meet the criteria of a change of less than acres and a capacity change of less than housing, just shy of 100 housing units. And finally, Waconia is another example of an emerging suburban edge community. Next slide, please. So we did have a number of amendments that included regional issues of regional policy significance. The first set of cases involved changes to community designation, which is part of regional land use policy. These were not controversial per se, but required an action by the council. Most significantly, they involved annexations from adjacent townships for development, including approximately 200 acres in Lakeville, 100 acres in Lake Elmo, and 8.5 acres in Prior Lake. Otherwise, they involve small adjustments along the border between two community designations, which these communities typically have. So the next issue in terms of housing policy, 4 amendments resulted in changes to land use guidance such that the city no longer had a sufficient inventory of land guided at densities high enough to support their allocation of affordable housing need. In the case of Forest Lake, a subsequent amendment corrected that inconsistency. And as I believe all of you know, that issue, that inconsistency affects the eligibility of these communities to participate in the Livable Communities program. In the case of the Egan-Nichols in the case of the Egan-Nichols amendment, the council found that the development associated with the amendment, which was a change from regional commercial to high-density residential, had a negative impact on land that was identified in a regional inventory as high quality habitat. And so therefore the council found that it was inconsistent with natural resource policy. And finally, in the case of Greenfield, the city initiated the expiration of all 770 acres of land in the city that were under the Agricultural Preserves Program. They did this by removing that designation from that property. And this is an 8-year process for the city to initiate an unenrollment in that process. In that program. Finally, the city has a community designation of emerging suburban edge as well as diversified rural. And I guess I will add, in case there's any interest, that the city asserted that they wanted to provide additional flexibility for those properties to develop under the guiding land uses that were assigned. Next slide, please. So I hope that provided a good inventory for you of the what we've seen in terms of amendments. We are continuing to analyze the data. We'd like to be able to respond to inquiries and interests regarding amendments and themes, including hearing from you right now about what has piqued your interest and what you think might be useful in terms of your own discussions around regional policy. We want to align this work with other data collection and analysis, such as building permit data, forecast data, housing, land use supply, and those kinds of efforts. We are going to be working on internal protocol for data tracking. As you might imagine, we're dealing with lots of apples and oranges and other fruits, and so all these comp plan amendments are somewhat unique in their own ways, and so that's certainly been more of a challenge for us than the initial inventory of comp plans. And we want to work on scheduling a future and regular reporting out of this data so that we can begin to identify some trends and themes over time. So next slide, please. So just in conclusion, there's our contact information on the slide there, and that will conclude our presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for the presentation and for your work on this. And questions or discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, would it be possible to get information about apartment buildings, what they are built on? What was the land before? If it's greenfield development, was it immediately zoned to apartment or high density and then ultimately developed as high density, or was it originally guided for something else and then the market's not there, so then after a period of time when it doesn't develop, then it becomes, changes land use designation to become an apartment building? And then also for already developed areas, when apartments are added, are they failed commercial, or because it seems like there's a lot of apartment buildings that end up being built in places that weren't originally envisioned for apartments. And given the importance that the council places on the amount of land designated for high density housing, it would be nice to know whether that's really meaningful or not. Because just when I look around my community, there was an empty commercial property 2 blocks from my house that's now 270 apartment buildings. It had to sit empty for about 20 years before they gave up and switched it to apartments. But I realized that how many acres of land are guided for apartments is easy to track from a record keeping standpoint for the council, but when it's a moving target because it's always changing, then it makes it kind of less meaningful in terms of the eligibility for programs, if that makes any sense.
I guess I'll take a stab at that, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Wolf, you asked a number of related questions, and I think some of those inquiries can be addressed. I'm not. I know we've wanted to develop our practice in terms of tracking redevelopment and how that's occurring. I appreciate the interest in these re-guiding from commercial properties that have been guided for commercial land and then were re-guided either to mixed use or high density residential and such. We don't really necessarily have a complete inventory of related to these questions. With the comprehensive plan composite that we addressed with you earlier, we had asked cities to identify where they thought where development would occur, and certainly we had the guiding land uses. We didn't necessarily have an inventory of what was on the ground. So, and in terms of the building permit data, I am not certain if we have uh, pre-existing conditions, if you will, of what was at the site. I don't believe we do. But I'd like to noodle on this question a bit and get back to you, and perhaps and maybe Lisa or Angela have something they want to add to that. There's a lot there. Thanks. Director Barra has something to add.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would offer certainly we had seen in some communities, certainly in the 2030 cycle, um, and especially around the region, a lack of guiding for high enough densities to support affordable housing, to support higher density development like apartment buildings, and in some cases an overabundance of land guided for commercial or industrial that kind of just, like you said, Councilmember Wolf, really just kind of sat there for a while, and in some cases a long while. And a lot of those amendments to 2030 plans really were driven by supporting changing from that non-residential to a residential piece. That isn't always the case these days, especially with those 2040 updates. A lot of communities have corrected for that, but not everybody, and are still kind of moving that forward. And we do see where we do get new apartment buildings. Our assumption is primarily that it is on areas that are guided for higher density because they have to apply for a sewer connection permit in order to connect that up to our wastewater system. And it's only in the cases where that land isn't guided appropriately where we're seeing those amendments. So what you're seeing today is just a slice of what's actually being built, but we can do some further analysis, as Mike had noted, connecting our building permit data to our comp plan amendment data as well and looking at that gap.
Thanks, Councilmember Wolf.
That's great. Further? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, Caitlin and Michael, this was a very fascinating presentation, so thank you for that. Michael, my question goes back to slide 12. And apologies in advance if this is a dumb question, but what is the difference between administrative review and a council review, or is that a matter of some threshold being crossed?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lee, just to reiterate, we have 13 criteria, I believe, that we mentioned that a proposed amendment needs to meet in order for a staff to review it and authorize the plan, and then sent out. The authorization of that amendment is sent out as a letter, and the council member of the district is copied, so you will know about those administrative amendments in your district. So we had, and then we had identified on which slide was it here?
Slide 6.
Thank you. Slide 6, kind of what are sort of the key criteria, and
Again, if it's a change of capacity of more than 100 units or more than 80 acres, those are kind of some of the more significant criteria that basically kicks it up to the council for the council to review it from the different policy areas. So obviously, in terms of inconsistency with regional policy, that's certainly something that sort of automatically has it reviewed by the council. We, a part of this analysis too could include an evaluation of where those thresholds for administrative versus council review might be. So that's something that kind of is in the back of our mind, ensuring that with those reviews that you see and with presentations like this, that you're comfortable in terms of what you're hearing and knowing about this set of comprehensive plan and how it relates to regional planning and policy.
Thanks, Mr. Larson. Councilmember Lee, if I may. So a council review we vote on, right? Administrative review we don't.
Correct.
Thank you. Well, further questions? No, I can see you all, and I don't see any hands up. No further questions? All right. Michael, Caitlin, thanks so much for your work. I agree. I think this is really fascinating, and I look forward to deeper analysis as we continue to go to work through this. And I really am interested in ideas that Councilmember Wolf brought forward, and look forward to any further analysis that we can attach either building permits or other information we have into what was there before. And in a way, I think it kind of indicates is our planning accurate, not necessarily effective, and then the impacts of the market on comprehensive plans. I think this is fascinating. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. We will definitely follow up on specifically on Councilmember Wolf's comments, and if any of you have further thoughts as you reflect on this, we'd certainly be interested to know. It's fairly complex, but we've enjoyed working on it and sort of uncovering some of the information, and look forward to sort of a further discovery process and how it might be helpful in the future.
And I do see Councilmember Johnson has.
Yeah, just real briefly, and people have heard me before bring this up, especially on the housing work group that we have. And I don't know I don't know how much information we have, but again, as we're addressing the housing shortage that, we are experiencing right now, that's exacerbating all kinds of problems. I'm still just so interested in, over the past several decades, the trend where housing that was normally in possession of a homeowner has now moved into investors or Airbnbs, or that type of situation where they're being taken out of the marketplace, out of our inventory for people to purchase. So that's so interesting to me, because we continue to develop, we're trying to preserve housing, but what is happening with the shift of who's owning what and to what purpose that home that might have been a home ownership opportunity in the past has now been removed? Can be a rental opportunity, which isn't bad, but I'm just curious to see again, and it's shown up now in the media too, as people are starting to notice this phenomenon that's probably been going on for a while, but just something I'd like to try to figure out. And is there a way that local governments can pay attention to this or have a role in this, or just us to know too? So that's just a simple comment. And I would echo what everyone said. I really love to see these kinds of reports, because I just know many times, even in my role at the City of Plymouth, off would go a comp plan amendment to the Met Council, and which bucket it would fall into. But it's interesting to see how it all comes together throughout the region. So thank you for your report today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Any further discussion, comments, questions? All right, hearing none, thanks again. And we will move on to our final information item for the evening. It's the 2021 Work Plan and Housing Strategies updates. And we have both Director Barajas and Ms. Stephanie Paulson here to present. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I almost neglected to unmute myself before I started talking. I'm really excited to be with you today to report out on what we've accomplished this year and on housing strategies as well. And Steph will go into more detail on the activities of the Metro HRA. And I know we talk with you throughout the year about all of the work we're doing. And I also know it's easy to lose track of all of the stuff we've done. I know I do. I often look back and say, did we do that? And have to check in with our staff on those. And they're like, yes, Lisa, don't you remember? That was March. So let's maybe next slide, please, Greg, and we'll jump right into our presentation. So today we'll talk about, in particular, status update on the special initiatives and projects that we had planned for 2021. These were part of the Community Development Committee's work plan. In addition to, typically in our work plan, we include all of our regular activities, so review of comprehensive plans and plan amendments, the livable communities grants that you review and approve as well, like the TBRA you just had this afternoon. That's our regular work. So today we're just going to focus on those special initiatives and projects. We'll also talk about the housing strategies that are a part of your strategic plan under your housing priority. And as I mentioned, Steph will give an update on the Metro HRA activities. Next slide, please. This is part of our overall work planning process, which we build up from what we're required to do by the feds or by state government, direction from Thrive MSP 2040, and then those additional council priorities that layer that up as we do every year. So today, again, will be that report out, but that's leading us to a discussion in January of this committee's work plan and what we want to do in 2022. And then we'll finalize that work plan in late January or early February. So really wanting to plant the seeds with you today and be thinking about some of those things that you may want to address. And Councilmember Johnson gave a good snippet of that at the end of our last presentation on some topics that we may want to cover in the future. So you can share them today, or we can discuss them further in January as well. Next slide, please. So on our CDC special projects and initiatives, we've completed a number of items, as you can see here, including our second award of our Regional Parks Equity Grant Program. Cam Bailey and Maurice Gumstaz reported last week at Committee of the Whole on the Solar for Vouchers program pilot and had a discussion with all of you around next steps and what that might look like after this pilot year. I report out on the land use inventory that we do every 5 years. The development of a regional parks demographic analysis tool, our update, the regional update of our demographic and employment forecast, which now goes through 2050, and our annual population and household estimates as they go with census. Next slide, please. We have a lot of projects that are underway that you've heard about some of these already, and some of them are just right around the corner, and we'll be reporting to you in the first quarter or so in the coming year. In the staff report that was posted with this, we had noted on where we were at with a number of these, but are items that we've talked about with you over the course of the year and are things that staff continue to work on. And that includes a lot of items. I know staff have come to talk already about the historical cultural study. We have our regional parks visitor study that we do every 5 years. We've talked about a greenhouse gas emissions tool and scenario planning tool, and Steph and her team were talking about mobility demonstration program or community choice not too long ago as well. And as Angela mentioned, the debrief project earlier, this is our comprehensive plan process evaluation that we'll be reporting out to you in the coming year as well, right around the corner. Next slide, please. And a number of additional items here that continue to be underway as well, including some studies, some partnerships that we have with others like the DNR, some long-range planning components, including our climate action plan and some regional planning efforts underway. Are in our Planet program, and some additional items that were delayed, like community profiles or visualizing regional inequities, because we're waiting on data from the US Census or from others in order to make those updates. So we continue to kind of be a little bit, we're ready to go as soon as we get those data. And while we have this marked as underway, the composite and trends in 2040 comp plans, we have been reporting quite a bit to you on the whole variety of ways and different deep dives that staff have been doing into those plans, and certainly would love any additional feedback or input you have on further questions you might have on those trends that we see in the comprehensive plans. Next slide. On our housing strategies, we've categorized these kind of into these three buckets, as I had shared with you last year at this time. We have the regular work like technical assistance and other items that we regularly do as part of our everyday work. There were a number of strategies that were related to our annual budgeting process. So where you want to put funds, where you want to really focus efforts. And that's where we apply that direction in our annual budget requests. And then the special projects and initiatives, much like CDC, are the items that I'll focus on today as well. Next slide. So this year, in addition to the work that we said we completed in 2020, this year in 2021, we completed that review of Livable Communities Act programs to ensure that alignment and incorporated that into this year's FDP, or the Fund Distribution Plan. So that one we consider check off, although we continue, as Tara has mentioned before, to evaluate and refine our process as we're going through that. And she and her team have reported to you and had discussions with you in the past month or so around some of those refinements based on what we've seen so far. Next slide. We have a number of items that are underway around technical assistance, around reviewing council-owned land to support affordable housing, programs that I won't get into too much because I know Steph will be talking about some of these related to those like Homework Starts for Home with Home, and exploring additional affordable home ownership strategies, which I know Tara has spoken with you about with the affordable home ownership pilot. And the next slide, please. In addition, we continue to always explore and look at potential revenue streams that contribute to affordable housing preservation production. And that residential preferences survey, I'll leave to Steph and won't steal her thunder there. And of course, we're always exploring new funding opportunities as they come available. And the HRA's team is a prime example of the number of different opportunities that we've been able to capture just in this calendar year. Next slide, please. There are only 2 items that we haven't started. And last year at this time when I was reporting back to you, we had 5 or 6 items that we hadn't started, and we were uncertain what our work plan capacity was going to look like for 2021. And we were asking you how to prioritize these items and what we might do. In this calendar year, we're feeling much more confident about being able to tackle these remaining 2 items and complete the other underway items that I had noted on the previous slide. So at a minimum, we will definitely be getting these 2 underway in 2022, and if not, moving toward being able to mark this as a green check the box type of we accomplished this as well. So I wanted to share that with you and really just thank our team for being just so excellent at really thinking through and figuring out how we can move through many of these items, thinking through some really hard processes too in program development, and always being on top of all new opportunities that could become available and taking advantage of those opportunities for funding and programs through Housing and Urban Development Department with the federal government. Next slide, please. So with that, I will turn it to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Stephanie, welcome.
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So I'm here to share a handful of slides with you about all of our work that we've done in the Metro HRA over the last calendar year. Some of these are just some really cool stats I'm going to drop as just information that we're proud of in our work unit and in community development. So when it comes to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we continue to be high performers. We are going to have a 98% voucher utilization rate and plan to use 98% of the funds awarded, as well as 98% of the vouchers. We have selected 562 applicants from our wait list. We did 107 project-based voucher lease-ups. 2 really interesting facts coming out of COVID, and we'll have to see kind of what happens in the long game. Our average HAP has increased to 877. In 2020, our average HAP was 820. So this is probably in response to a variety of variables. We implemented small area fair market rents. So we have a variety of new payment standards with higher rent areas. We also have had incredible income changes in the last year. So that's going to impact our average housing assistance payment. And our attrition rate is down. In 2020, we had an average attrition rate of 57 per month, and it's down to 39 per month. We're working really hard to invest in different strategies and housing stabilization strategies. And I'm going to touch on those, especially with our special purpose vouchers in future slides here. Next slide, please, Greg.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, before you go off that slide, can I
Yeah.
please just ask you, and maybe this is super obvious and I'm making it more complicated, but what's a lease up? Is that a lease signing or is that
Yeah,
some
I'm
change of
sorry.
status? Okay, thank you.
I'm
Thanks.
sorry,
That's
Chair
fine.
Logan. Yes, it is. So it would just be someone has moved in and we're thinking of them as kind of a new admission to the program. So
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Sorry about that. Oh,
Yeah, a
Councilmember
question,
Bento.
Councilmember Bento, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stephanie. Can you tell me what the acronym HAP means again?
Housing assistance payment.
Got it. Got it.
I'm
Thanks.
sorry. You guys are just going to have to say, Steph, too far. Pause right there. I'm sorry about that. Housing assistance payment. Yes. So our housing assistance payments are going up. And remember when we implemented small area fair market rents, what was that, July 2020? There was going to be kind of this increase in HAP, and we have to wait to kind of see the fallout where people who were held harmless, when they had a decrease in payment standards, they weren't going to get that decrease until they moved from the unit they were living in at the time of implementation. So in 2 or 3 years even, we might start to see these numbers balance out a bit, but we still have some held harmless payment standards that haven't quite come full circle.
Well, thanks. Any other questions at this time? Questions? Hearing none, please, Stephanie, go on.
All right, thank you. This is just to summarize our emergency housing voucher program. We've talked with you about it. I know that you've probably heard about it. You all are very in touch with what's happening in housing in our region. As a reminder, in July 2021, the Metro HRA was issued 218 vouchers, emergency housing vouchers. These vouchers were to be used for families who are currently experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, fleeing domestic violence, or recently homeless, or that the voucher would help to stabilize a family who would otherwise be in risk of housing instability. So this was a really targeted special purpose voucher. We received 218. The Metro HRA entered into an MOU with the 3 local coordinated entry systems. It complicates the work, but it's the way to make sure that we're touching the most number of families possible in our region. So we entered into an MOU with SMAC, Ramsey, and Hennepin coordinated entry systems. Metro HRA thus far has received 9 EHV referrals with HAT affiliations, but we continue to track that work. As a reminder, HAT is that homeless action team, those transit affiliated vouchers, as we work with people experiencing homelessness and using transit as non-destination riders. 2 of them have been issued vouchers, and 1 has in fact submitted an RTA and is in the process of lease up. We have 95 vouchers that were issued when I submitted this PowerPoint, and actually I just checked live stats today, and now we're up to 97. So 97 EHVs have been issued since July 1st. We continue to have meetings with our partners, Ramsey, Hennepin, and SMAC, to make sure that we can be meeting with our service providers and make sure that we all are kind of supporting the families in the best ways possible. We have 17 families who are under contract, which means they are leased up and we are paying landlords. So this program is moving right along. It's been quite an undertaking, but we're moving forward. Another really awesome thing that we did in order to kind of streamline this emergency housing voucher program in 2021 was we entered into a JPA, or Joint Powers Agreement, with Minneapolis. This was to ease administrative burden and the families who want to move to Minneapolis but were issued a Metro HRA voucher through Hennepin County. They can live there without the burden of portability, which is the dream in the voucher game long term, that portability goes away. But for now, portability does not exist with Minneapolis public housing and emergency housing vouchers. Next slide, please. An update on mainstream vouchers. So mainstream vouchers, you'll hear about this HAT partnership again, this Homeless Action Team partnership. As a reminder, we have 203 of these mainstream vouchers. It's a continued partnership with the HAT team. And in 2021, we have started to implement housing stability initiatives. So this, what this looks like is more regular contact with our outreach team. So what we were finding is families who were leasing up with the mainstream vouchers at year one for recertification, it was maybe COVID time. HUD gave us tons of flexibility, which then made, I think, things more complicated. Families didn't have an inspection when they should have had an inspection. They didn't have to fill out paperwork when they normally would have had to, or we offered leniency in verification returns, all because of flexibilities that HUD gave us in response to COVID. It's making this year really, really tricky because families are like, wait a minute here, I didn't do this last year. What's going on? Have the rules changed? And it's required a different level of engagement. So we have our mainstream vouchers working with outreach again to do a variety of things, whether it be helping obtain verifications, helping to obtain paperwork, doing a 90-day follow-up at move-in with kind of a debrief of tenant education. And that's like, hey, you got a lot of information. Can I remind you about kind of what you signed up for with this with this mainstream voucher program, and a little synopsis. Another thing that our outreach team is doing is completing inspections through the outreach team as opposed to through the general process. This is kind of helping us be able to cater to these mainstream voucher families and saying, if you're having problems with a work schedule and you're working nights and you're sleeping days, we can be flexible with you. How can we make sure that you stay housed and that you are able to keep this mainstream voucher? Next slide, please. We continue to work on our landlord and resident engagement. In 2022, we would love to start thinking about having this to be more specialized work. A landlord engagement specialist and a resident engagement specialist. Now that we have our outreach manager of special initiatives and the HRA, we're able to kind of have a more visionary work in what we think for short-term goals, long-term goals. Not that we haven't always had that kind of in our minds, but she's able to kind of put all of these grand ideas that we've had into motion. And so hopefully we're able to come to you sometime in 2022 with an update on how we see this coming to fruition. We continue to do landlord focus groups and new owner briefings virtually. We are offering housing search assistance to families off of the wait list or families who are struggling to place their vouchers. And we continue to meet with our resident advisory board in 2021. A really, really fun fact to share with you all is that in 2021, a member of our housing outreach team, Abdiaziz Ibrahim, and you've probably heard his name before, did a presentation at Minnesota Now virtually to talk about all of the really cool landlord engagement strategies that Metro HRA uses. And so we did that in partnership with Minneapolis Public Housing and Clay County to capture kind of big, medium housing authorities, small housing authorities, but really to share the strategies that we found to be successful and had really great turnout for that presentation. Next slide, please, Greg. I know Terry's talked to you about this. I think I've mentioned this to you, or Edina Affordable Housing Partnership. That's just a reminder. We received $2 million with Edina, the city of Edina, to commit to affordable housing there. Metro HRA hopes to locate additional homes to continue to balance this portfolio, but on December 1st, we closed on our first property. It is a 3-bedroom unit in Edina. It has a fenced-in yard. It's within walking distance to public transit and regional park, and so it's really awesome to add to our portfolio. We are hoping, we just actually received an email from our wonderful colleague in real estate today to give us an update as she continues to locate housing or housing options for us in Edina, and we also work with our city partners as they continue to reach out to people who are interested in working with us. Next slide, please. And this will just kind of be a high-level update on 3 cool initiatives that we did last year, or I guess this year, but looking back to 2021. Foster Youth to Independence, we have executed MOUs with Carver County, Anoka County, and Hennepin County. As a reminder, we came to talk to you in 2021 about the Foster Youth to Independence. These are special purpose vouchers where we partner with Child Welfare Agency. It's a 36-month voucher. And as a part of this voucher, they will work with a service provider to make sure that they are kind of using this 36 months to transition to or get a transition strategy in place. And so we'll have 25 vouchers that we can request from HUD right away. What this kind of looks like in implementation is HUD won't give us the vouchers until we have an idea of who will need them. So the counties are working to figure out which youth will need the vouchers, and we provide kind of a number or an initial kind of to keep anonymity, but to say we've got someone, and then we will request 25 vouchers from HUD. As soon as we use those, we can request another 25, and we'll continue to do so as long as HUD will let us. We've received another 10 vouchers for the VASH program, and we're up to 170, and we just actually received our awards. So those will be effective January 1st, 2022. So we will continue to build that VASH program with our partners at the VA. And our Homework Starts with Home partnership. This was a partnership that kind of continues to invest in our place-based strategies. It's with solid ground, and what we're doing is we are kind of allowing families to stay where they're already living. Families are established in schools, and so Solid Ground works with us to give us a referral. So far, we've received 15 referrals and are continuing to accept more for this Homework Starts with Home partnership. So just allowing families to stay once their transitional housing with Solid Ground ends, they're able to stay with us in a permanent voucher program. And I should mention, VASH is the supportive housing for veterans. So I just throwing acronyms at you, and I'm not even filling you in, so I apologize for that, but that's it, supportive housing for veterans. We have an existing program, but every single time they let us apply for more, we send in our interest and cross our fingers, and so we got 10 more effective January 1st, 2022. Our new HR manager, Chang Lao, she is working really closely with the VA to make sure that we are maximizing the way that we receive referrals and getting all of the needs of our veterans met, especially in this continued COVID kind of world where we're doing so many things virtually. Next slide, please. And I know you've heard me talk about this. You're probably real sick of me by now, but the mobility demonstration program, we continue to work on that. We're staffing it. We're working on opportunity maps with HUD. We had the Metro HRA again, and you've heard me rave about our research department time and time again, but our research department continues to support this work and us submitting our final. So we received the map with some tracks. We send back local knowledge that say, hey, I know that you're not sure about this track. Let us tell you more about it. And so we're working on sending that back in partnership with Minneapolis Public Housing. And then we hope to get recruitment and enrollment plans and continue to move this forward. I anticipate sometime in the beginning of 2022, you will see our new HRA manager, Margaret Perez, come to visit you with a more formal update with kind of tangible updates and less planning and implementation and more granular details about the demonstration and how far we've come. And with that, I can open up to questions or questions for Lisa for the slides that she presented.
Thank you, Stephanie and Lisa, for the report. Really fascinating. Questions on this report? I thought I heard someone's hand go up, and no, I don't see it.
Rivas.
So, Councilmember Chambliss, thank you.
Wow, this was kind of an amazing evening. A lot of great reports for our entire committee, and just being able to see how much progress we've had, what was in play, and the hard work to make sure that people have homes in our region. You guys are just pressing. So thank you to all the staff that have been working on these initiatives. We know that we are kind of maximizing our resources, and we really appreciate, I can say that I really appreciate all of that effort and the willingness to kind of go above and beyond to keep all these balls in the air. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was all prepared to ask you about the mobility demonstration project, and you slid it in right there at the end. So that's fantastic. But one thing that's been on my mind, and Lisa, you may have mentioned this, apologize if I missed it, but maybe a month or two ago, we heard about the LCDA TOD policy expansion pilot. So I'm interested in tracking how that materializes in 2022.
Thank you, Councilmember. Director Barajas, did you have a response or?
I was just going to
Taking
say
it,
thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom, that's something that certainly you will hear about again when Tara and the team come back to talk about the fund distribution plan in 2022 and as part of our regular evaluation, but I'll make a special note of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Oh, Councilmember Lindstrom. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say anything. Basically, I'm interested in anything that's been a pilot. Kind of where it's at, what the results, is it going to be expanded, or what did we learn? Are we going to continue with it? Are we going to mothball it for good reasons? Whatever it might be.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Johnson, was your hand up? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw it.
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the whole team, though. I mean, the incredible work you guys are doing. And, you know, again, I'm very honored to be part of the work group around this. It's one of my passions. And so I just might, you know, everybody at the entire council and again, especially around housing, because it's just wonderful everything you're doing and to have such a talented team engaging in such important issues. I'm very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lee, we saw your cheers as well, so thank you. Councilmember Vento, did you? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just overly anticipating everyone's, I guess. Any further discussion? Further discussion? Yeah, I just want to add my thanks for the incredible work of both of you, but your teams as well. And I'm just looking at everything that you just presented, and especially when you consider so much of this, the pilots and things involve our interactions with the federal government, and the fact that we can keep moving things along at this pace is just really testament to our staff's abilities. And Lisa, I appreciate your raising the point that with the housing special projects and initiatives that we have less than half on the list that we had at this time last year. And again, I think that it supports the incredible work of the group and the focus that you have. And so I look forward to seeing what progress we make. And then I didn't know there weren't any questions or anything, but Lisa, when you opened this, you talked about additional input. Was that just sort of a general comment for interest, and we'll receive this report and have that kind of inform what other kind of input we want to give as we go forward? Was that your intent, or?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. As we're thinking about our work plans for 2022, I wanted to just point that we'll be coming back to in January and February for our discussion here at the committee on what you would like us to be working on. We certainly will take ideas today, but this will not be your last opportunity for that discussion.
Great. It sounds like a well-sequenced discussion. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, thanks again for the report. Thanks you and your teams for all of your work on this. It's really encouraging. And that concludes the items on our agenda today. Committee members, anything else? Yeah, good clap, Councilmember Johnson. Okay, anything? Michelle, anything?
No, I'm good. We'll see you next year.
Yeah, see you next year, everyone. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy the season.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, with that
Holidays. Thanks, Michelle.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like Reva's sweater.
Merry Christmas.
Nice.
Nice send off. Thank you.